This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. Welcome to the show.
This is American Real TV.
What's your mission? What do you want your legacy to be? You have such a great story. I cannot wait to share it. Welcome to the American Real family. I cannot wait to air this episode.
And now, here's your host, Roger Brooks.
What does it mean to rise, not just personally, but collectively? How do we align our lives with purpose, presence, and peace in a world that often feels chaotic and distracted? These are the kinds of questions my next guest lives and teaches every day. Joining me today is Joseph Moore, a man of many paths, QiGong instructor, writer, teacher, artist, business owner, and explorer. His journey is one of integration, blending ancient wisdom with modern practice, and grounding spiritual ascension into tangible daily action. He's the best-selling author of Cultivating Ascension, a book that's less of a guidebook and more of a gentle wake-up call to slow down, tune in, and reconnect with what truly matters. Through QiGong, journaling, self-reflection, and the daily discipline of intention, Joseph invites us to move from survival to expansion, from distraction to conscious presence. We'll talk today about the power of morning routines, the role of self-examination through tools like the Wheel of Life, and why focusing on the now is perhaps our most radical form of healing. And we'll explore how the raising of the collective consciousness isn't just an abstract ideal, but a very real antidote to the unrest of our times. This is a conversation about energy, alignment, and choosing a higher path, not just for ourselves, but for everyone we touch. Let's welcome Joseph Moore. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on today. And I think the topics that we're going to talk about, they're very important to me, as these are things I talk about on a regular basis to my inner circle. So I'm happy to be able to have you expand upon some of these things today. But let's start with the book itself, your latest book, which is Cultivating Ascension. And really, if you could give us the backdrop of the purpose and the intention of how this book came to be.
Well, my background is in cultural, social anthropology, and I have a doctorate in divinity. So obviously, spirituality and my spiritual beliefs are very prominent within this book. But at the same time, I'm very open-minded and objective about what other people believe and their influence on modern society. But the purpose of this particular book is just trying to redefine what it is for self-empowerment, what that looks like, and try to assist in finding a communication with everybody's authentic self and bringing that out into the open. And, the steps from human to spirit is we all are seeking a connection with with the divine. What is it that makes us human, and trying to bring that into everyday life. And this book is my attempt to assist in that, how to bring that into everybody's everyday life. Not everybody wants to be a monk in a monastery, in order to get to, what happens after we're here on earth. That's not feasible. But what we can do is cultivate our voice system, our inner, finding out what that inner purpose is. And that's, we all have like, why am I here? But how do I get there? And that's what this book is. That's the intentions behind this book. How can I just improve on what's already going on? I might have, most people might have have a degree of success in their life, but still feel a little bit empty or disconnected. And quite frankly, we're living in a lot of chaos and stuff like that. So how do we tune that chaos out to hear what we need as an individual to feel fulfilled? And that's my perspective and where we're going with cultivating ascension.
Great. So help us understand. I think the best word for me to describe it is awareness, right? So help us understand awareness first. If I think once you're on this path, you're in tune to this, right? But
Yes.
sometimes it takes a while. I'm just, we look at our own lives. Like it took me decades and decades to be aware. Before that, we're not even aware of this topic. But then once you become aware of it, everything changes. But for those people that are listening and watching, that maybe they're thinking about their children who
Hmm.
aren't yet aware, or I think people become aware at different ages, and it could be some people are very young and some people are very old. Some people never become aware because they're so consumed in a life that just wouldn't be able to present this. So help us, if you can, from your perspective, understand awareness and I guess our role as an individual for our own awareness, and then maybe our role to help others become aware without being pushy or forceful.
Well, the way I look at awareness is uh being completely present in the now, in the moment, you know, really, really not being distracted by all these, like, you're sitting in a barbecue or something like that, and you got your kids in the background and stuff like that. But are you with your kids at the barbecue, or are you still thinking about what you got to do tomorrow? What you got to do, what happened at work yesterday? And you know the all of the stuff I hear on social media or television, stuff like that, it really affects your consciousness and your thought and the thoughts that you have inside. Okay, so how do what I'm the cultivating ascension is tuning that out and bringing awareness into the moment and in the now, and how and what steps that I do as an individual to get myself into that every day is a little bit of structure, a little bit of discipline in my daily life. A lot of it happens to do with that morning period. We all have our routines in the morning. I have to do this in order to start my day. Well, you know what? That's the best time that you can tune yourself and being present with just yourself, because sometimes you're always, all right, I got to take care of that person and that person, the kids got to get to school and things like that. Well, you know what, before you can give yourself all that energy out to your kids and stuff like that, you have to cultivate some energy within yourself. There's a Zen saying, you cannot fill others from an empty cup. And unless you're fulfilling yourself, you know, and it doesn't take much, but primarily your most focused time is the morning period between waking and before you start your routine. All right. And it's that period that you're just sitting with yourself. You don't really have nothing else going on up in here. All right. So how can we take that awareness of yourself and that calmness, and then cultivate it into a calmness that lasts throughout the day? And me personally, particularly, I have a qigong practice in the morning and stuff like that, where I have a little exercise routine. Some people do yoga. Qigong is an energy working routine similar to yoga, only it was cultivated by the Chinese 5,000 years ago. And it just connects me a little bit more. And because of that practice, I'm able to sustain that presence throughout the morning and throughout my day. I also do a meditation and or take a nap in the afternoon just to get myself re-energized. But it allows me to not be, to be more open. Like, all right, I get my routine, I got it. Now I got to get the kids to school. But the kids are waking up and they have a lot of questions, and usually, you all right, we'll talk about that later. No, all right, well, where is this coming from? Awareness is being in the moment, being present. But can we be present 100% of the time throughout the day? And
Great.
that's what yeah, and that's what we're attempting to do. And there's some actionable steps within the book that can create that.
So, can you give us a little bit more insight into the Qigong as far as actually what are you doing? Like what does that look like?
It is a movement meditation, okay? And it's also a way of anchoring yourself into nature or the present surroundings. Primarily, we're electromagnetic beings. Okay, humans have multiple layers, but we are electromagnetic beings. If we don't connect into nature periodically, or if we just don't connect into the earth or our immediate environment periodically, we kind of lose connections, and then we get a little chaotic, and then it's the modern term is grounding. All right, so first thing in the morning, when I have that morning period and stuff like that, I ground myself every day. Okay, and it ends the chaos and gets myself aware. Okay, I had a kink in my back this morning and stuff like that, so I'm doing movement and exercise to work out the kinks, keep my joints loose and stuff like that, so I physically feel better.
So
Okay.
you're getting on the ground, you're doing some stretches or movements. Can you walk us through that exactly?
Mm-hmm.
Like what because I think people will be interested in this, and we're like at least
Yeah.
like how do
Well,
I start? Like how do I get involved doing something like this?
it's similar to a yoga. It's just a derivative of yoga or tai chi. The most common uh relatable term is what people do in tai chi, where they have movements and stuff like that. The difference with qigong is I'm focusing on my energetic body. We have our physical body, we have our mental body, and we have a energetic body. There's 206 pathways. There. If you ever look at an acupuncture chart or anything like that, they show the meridians and stuff like that. We're basically a battery that needs to be recharged every once in a while, and the way to do it is to connect into the ground or connect with nature. In Japanese medicine, if you're not feeling well, they go to tell you to walk through some trees,
Hmm.
and go for a walk, get outside. Qigong also combines breath work, which is a lot of is is also a lot of meditation practices do breath work, and it gets your mental mind to focus on just one thing, and that brings additional awareness to being in the now. 20 minutes of being in the now can last you several hours, you know, and then you look at things a little bit from a different perspective, from a objective perspective that's non-emotional. We're taking out the emotion, we're taking out the noise that's surrounding us for that 20-minute period in the morning and stuff like that. And it's just, all right, you make different decisions. And then at the same time, when you have this routine and you practice it on a regular basis, you listen more, you hear more. And it's in that listening and that hear more that all of a sudden you feel that little voice inside you coming up into your environment. And then you can hear yourself think. I can hear myself think today. Okay. And you have that inner dialogue, and it's that inner dialogue that is actually your authentic connection to the collective conscious or the divine. The divine speaks to everybody. And there's a point where I touched that in the book, because this is what Jesus tried to explain to us. It is the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost. And it comes from a settled and heart. But if we look at our vibration and our and there's a chart in the book, and it talks about our electro vibrations and our frequencies on where we operate. Our human emotions operate. And it's, you've seen pictures of the chakras and stuff like that, the red, the orange, the yellow, and the green. The green is a neutrality, and that happens around your heart chakra. That's why when you're out in nature with trees and in the green, it has that effect of neutrality and gets your body to relax on a subconscious level. All right. When you're doing some type of morning practice and bringing your awareness into the now, you're looking for that neutrality. And when you open that up, then that's where the now and your authentic self come into play.
So interesting. You brought back a memory. When I was back in college, I did a summer kind of internship program in Japan, and it was with a construction company. And every morning, the very first thing, I think it was around 8 a.m., 8:30, the entire company would go downstairs, go outside into the parking lot, and spend about 10 to 15 minutes doing motion. There was a leader every day, there was a different leader. But to your point, I think this helped people get in tune with themselves and even though you're in a parking lot,
Yeah.
still you're outdoors. And it's really interesting that that's how they started their day.
And that's very basically how I start my day, and a lot of other people. But from a human perspective, it's a starting point and an end point. Yesterday ended when you start doing that morning thing, and you're beginning a new day. There's a lot of theorists that think that the human body is the only thing that needs sleep, and when you go to sleep, you're out there traveling with wherever you believe that we came from, doing your thing. And then it's like, okay, we got to go back into that body again and, deal with Earth time.
That's neat. That's neat. No, this
And
is
there's,
great.
yeah. But, but a lot of people sometimes do things without thinking. And to your original point of awareness and stuff like that, when you start doing these types of practices, then you become a lot more aware of awareness of what's going on around you. And you're able to filter it a little bit more objectively. And I think that is more important for today than any other time in our existence. We got to be a lot more objective about what's going on, and that's another part of the attempt to start this. There's a point in the book where I talk about the wheel of life, which is a coaching technique. I originally learned it from my studies in Native American practices as the wheel of life. And it's a way of self-examining where you are at any given moment of you could be 18 years old and you can use this and examine where you are with your life, and or you could be 40 years old and use the same thing and examine where you are with your life. And there's 8 categories in that, and some of it is your significant other, your career, your immediate environment, your belief system at that time, what you do for leisure, and on the spokes of the wheel, you basically, what parts of your life are you satisfied with, and what parts of your life are you not satisfied with. And it's basically a snapshot of where you are as a person, and that brings in more awareness. And okay, I'm not happy with my friend group right now, and I'm not happy with my career, but I'm happy over here, and I'm happy, I have a lot of playtime and stuff like that. I'm happy with leisure, and I'm happy with, my beliefs are working for me at the moment, uh, and what a general reference is, I believe in God, and me and God are good. Okay, so that those areas are satisfying, and what areas are not satisfying. So now that you have a snapshot of what you're satisfied with, you have a beginning point to start. All right, well, I can improve on this. My physical fitness is not where I want it to be. I'm 40 years old. I get tired all the time. Okay. I'm looking at my wheel of life, and I'm looking at my perspective, and like, okay, I need to spend more time doing something that gets me in a better physical condition. All right. There's that awareness thing. All of a sudden, now you're aware of something that you just been rolling through your day, and without that little tool, and there's lots of little tools within the book that people can use to, like a qigong practice or something like that. That's something physical. That's something that helps me clear my thoughts and stuff like that. A physical activity like going to the gym or exercising outside is all of a sudden, has a dual purpose where, I wasn't doing that before and I was always tired. So when the kids came home, I just wanted to be left alone and they wanted to play. Okay. So there's a lot of little tools that I'm doing within Cultivating Ascension that are just everyday type of activities. But the benefits on the back end are what you would term as awareness. Okay. Being here in the now.
So, Joe, for the average person, again, who's listening, right, and they may be aware of this, right, of these types of
Okay.
practices. What about
Yeah.
how they relate to their family, their friend group? Because, just all cards on the table, a lot of people think this stuff is far out, right? You and I may know it's not, right? This is,
Yeah.
but a lot of people do. They feel it's, hokey or whatever, however you want to term it. How would you encourage our listeners to be able, because I think at the end of the day, we want others to be turned on to this without being preachy, right? It's kind of like with religion.
Absolutely.
You want people to believe the same beliefs as you because there's some light at the end of the tunnel if you understand it. I think the same thing here. if people could understand the benefits of this, they want to pass it on to others, but they don't want to be preachy. They don't want to be, oh, there here he comes again, Joe, and he's going to be talking to me about the collective consciousness and what I need to, you know what I mean? So there's a balance there. How do we do that as average people to help others get to a place, or is it not our position to do so? Like, how do we manage that?
Well, according to Jesus or the Gospels of Mary Magdalene, she would say that those who have ears will hear, and those who don't. Okay. That's the free will of being human. That's what separates us from other entities or it's your choice. It's your choice. But if you're coming to a point in your life where you just, hey, look, I got the house, I got my car, I got my jet skis and stuff like that, but you're still not feeling satisfied,
Fulfilled.
okay, you know, then okay, well then maybe it's time to take a self-assessment. What exactly isn't satisfactory? You just said you got a great career, you're taking care of the bills, you got your toys and stuff like that, and you're going on your vacation, the kids are doing good in school, but you're not feeling satisfied. Okay, well, what part of it is unsatisfactory to you? you know all right, so then there's an assessment tool, that wheel of life again. All right, what areas, what you know I don't know of anybody that's always 100% satisfied in all the key areas of your life, you know or all of a sudden, maybe you're looking at, like, well, I don't really, when I was 18, yeah, you only live once. You go hard and you take all these risks and stuff like that. I got kids. I don't want to take so much risk, because if I get hurt, who's going to help my family? So your perspective changes throughout your lifetime. But at the same time, unless you take a moment or a day or an hour out of your day and decide what your new belief system is, what are your new requirements? Because what you required at 20 years old is not what you require at 40 years old. You know, the things that you thought were for, work for you when you're 20 and your belief system, then you've had all of a sudden 5, 10 years experience, and you start to say, okay, you start looking at 18 or 20 years. We can look at generational type things as a very prominent example that's very seeable, especially with technology and stuff like that. I grew up without ATM machines and cell phones, and you know, I had a lot of free time to figure out, you know, do stuff. This generation that's coming up now, they're always attached to a phone. They're always attached to social media, and what that brings. Okay. So our values have changed a lot, but you as an individual, what has changed about you? You're looking at it differently. You're seeing it through a certain amount of eyes. Unless you take a moment of time, and that's what this is. That's what self-empowerment, in my mind, is about. Is just taking and becoming self-aware of where I'm at today, and how do I go forward in the most productive, or at least the most educated, or experiencedly point of view. What can I do today that makes it better than yesterday? And that's what the commonality is. But we all want to be better, and at the same time we want to raise our kids better, than what we want to give them these things. There's things that they can do today that we, you know, didn't have access to, that's actually pretty phenomenal. It makes our jobs a lot easier, or we can do things quicker. But at the same time, we always have to have a moral or ethical code about doing those things. And at the same time, unless we're aware of and unless we're looking at things objectively, we don't know what that course is. We don't know what that road is.
Yeah.
So we as an individual have to take it and find out what it is, and that requires self-examination. That also but once you take that moment and start doing that, and then you know you do it once, you're going to do it again, because at some point you might get off course. When I was young and enthusiastic, when I graduated college, I graduated with my degrees and stuff like that. How many people actually use their degrees? All of a sudden the reality is like, okay, I have this job that's paying me X amount of dollars right now. I'm just going to keep making money because I want to have a house over my head. And then next thing you know, you're 5 or 10 years past what your emotional experiences were. All right, well, you're that person. You've gotten that boat, you have your jet skis, you have your house and stuff like that. But what was your passion when you were younger? Are you pursuing your passion? All right. What was it? Maybe it's time to look at that. But unless you take the time to self-examine and self-aware, and there's tools, and that's what this book assists. There's little tools. The other part of that is also trying to get people to define what their moral and ethical compass is. And it's based on our teachers and stuff like that. And at some point, we all want to define what our purpose is and how that relates to an afterlife, if we believe in an afterlife. At the same time, we could have a life that's not successful. I didn't have the same I didn't have the right schooling. I barely graduated college, or I didn't graduate high school. Okay. I'm a person that didn't have the same, I had a broken family or something like that. I'm really struggling with alcoholism and things like that. All right. What are the tools for that person? They're the same tools. They're the same tools that you use as a successful person to also help you if you're not successful or you're struggling. Okay. And at the same time, those people are more aware because things aren't working. They aren't working for them. Okay. The now pretty much isn't a good place to be. So how do I get from there to there? And the same tools in both cases are the exact same things that have been preached to us for thousands of years. The rules that govern human beings as a species have been there for thousands of years. And the tools that are in this book are those tools that they gave us 6,000 years ago. And they said, follow this and you'll be okay.
Right. So,
And
no, and I get that. But again, if we're trying to, if people understand this, they're already on this path, how do you help your kids? Like my kids are 19 and 23. They don't want to hear this.
okay.
They don't want to hear this, right? They're not going to take the time to read the book. how do we help them at least start to think about it? What advice would you give? Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a parent, it could be all different age groups, but if someone is on this path and they're putting in the work and they have the awareness and they're being present as best they can, how do you help others do the same thing?
Those who have ears will hear, and those who don't, I mean,
No, you're right. I just wondered if
I,
there's a little hack to say, okay, try
something to
this
turn
exercise.
something to turn on the light bulb. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you're a 19-year-old, you pretty much figure that you have life figured out and
You
stuff
know
like that.
everything.
I got it.
Yeah.
I had school. I'm ready to conquer the world. Um, okay, well, what did you do today to get to that accomplishment? Okay, what's your plan? Because everybody needs a plan at some it doesn't have, and if you don't write down that plan, if that 19-year-old kid doesn't write down that plan, then he doesn't know where he's going.
Yeah. That
You
was my
know,
next question is I know
because
you talk about journaling. So I hope maybe that's where you're going with this.
exactly. It's the same thing that I learned in business about time management. Okay. Everybody has the same amount of time. We have 24 hours in a day, 81,000 minutes. And, all right. So, how are you spending the time in your day? All right. Well, I get up, I go to work. If you're 19 years old, I got about 6 hours of work per day, and then I'm going to spend 8 hours with my friends. Okay, so 8, 6, that's 14 hours out of the day. You slept for 8. You've pretty much used your day. You only have like 1 or 2 hours to get your dream, if you know what your dream is. All right. Everybody has something that they're passionate about. Everybody. Everybody has something that they want to do. It might be macrame. But unless you spend an hour or two a day doing macrame, it ain't going to get done. And you're not going to feel fulfilled. Okay. So you're 19 years old. You got your plan. Okay. How much time in the day are you spending on your plan? All right. You may spend it Monday. You spent 2 hours working on building that car. You have this car, it's your project, you want to get it because it's going to be better than my neighbor's car, but that's your passion. All right. You spend it on Monday, and all of a sudden you got to work Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Well, I didn't get to it. I didn't get the car sitting there, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday comes around. Hey, my friends are getting together. We're going out. Car's still sitting there. It might sit there for a week. It might sit there for, Saturday I'm going to work on the car a little bit. No, every day you've got to work towards what your passion is. If you only spend an hour a day doing it, then all of a sudden you spent 6, 7 hours that week. You're 6 or 7 hours closer to what your goal is. And without a goal, without a plan or something like that, you're not gonna succeed. You're not gonna find it. At the same time, you're not gonna feel as fulfilled when you're out with your friends. You know, because when you're out with your friends, you're having fun. This is what I did this week. This is what After a while, it gets kind of routine. It gets kind of be the same thing, unless you're working on your passion. And then whatever that passion is, you can say, well, you know what? I rebuilt the carburetor on the car and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, tomorrow I'm going to put some headers on it and stuff like that. You know, you have something that excites you, and you have something to talk about that's yours.
So you're
It's
saying
not something that you
you're saying it's okay to talk to your 19-year-old about this, right? About, hey, write down your goals, have a plan, spend the time every day. So I think what you're saying is that if they start to get into that routine, they'll start to figure it out, right? The ears will start to be open, but
Yeah.
we might have to give them that boost to they may just not know like that they
Yeah.
to write this stuff down. So to your point about journaling, is that part of the process is encouraging people to write down?
Absolutely. You can't see where you've been. You don't know where you're going unless you can see where you've been. Bob Marley quoted that. You know, you don't know the future unless you know your past. All right. So you write down, journaling isn't just a way of also planning, it's also a way of coping with things that you don't understand or don't have the answers to. It's a way of getting out it's also getting a way of getting out emotions that you don't want to think about because it's distracting you from enjoying your day. All right. So if you take, you know, I was presented with journaling when I was 13 years old. Okay. And it was a way of like, and she put it to me, this is what you do. You take a sheet of paper and every day you write whatever you're feeling on that sheet of paper. It could just be one sentence. Today I feel happy. And if you don't have anything else to add to it, fine. Turn it over. Come to it the next day. Get in the habit of looking at that next day. That next day, all of a sudden, you may have, I was in a car accident. I spent 6 months building my car and now it's ruined again. And you have all these things all this frustration, all these emotions. And next thing you know, you filled 3 or 4 pages in that journal. Okay. Flip it over. Next day. Okay. Insurance company bought me a new car. I have a new car. I'm out here and I can go to work and it's also a way that when things start going a little off kilter, you can look back and say, okay, I did this and this was good. This has got me back on track. But unless you, or all of a sudden you've looked at that, and I'm using that car analogy again, I spent 6 weeks working on it every day in my journal. All of a sudden, yeah, I hit my goal. All right. The goal isn't is great, but what's the next goal? And how do you get to the next goal unless you know what you did to get to the first goal?
Right.
And that's where journaling comes in. And at the same time, if you're a lot of people that are struggling or something like that, and you have a lot of inner emotions that you don't know how to sort through, a lot of inner dialogue, that's where journaling really comes to fruition, because then you can examine it, and then when you're feeling pretty good, you can look back and say, oh, wow, I was really down. That was a bad day. Okay, but it's not, I'm in a good day today. How do you know? And then you can say, wow, I've really done something. Another sense of accomplishment, you know, just, but unless you're actively doing something every day to get to whatever your passion is or your goal, it just won't happen for you. And that's what I look at when you're 19 years old and stuff like that. Because if I knew this when I was 19 years old, I might not have been running the streets as much as
Right.
I was.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for breaking that down and explaining it. Definitely helped me. I'm sure it helped others. Okay, one of our last topics here is something again that I've been aware of for several years, but I'd love to get your take on. raising of the collective consciousness, and as you say, as a deterrent to chaos. Help people understand what it means to raise the collective consciousness.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of chaos going on. And back in 2016, there's a study by Michael Dilbeck and Kenneth Kavanaugh. And they scientifically proved that there is a collective consciousness. You know, it was something that we've been aware of since the 60s and longer and stuff like that, but everybody always had that little bit of doubt. They took in 2016, they proved without a doubt. And what they did is there is an area in Michigan that was known for a lot of murders, a lot of crime. And they introduced transcendental meditation
TM.
by a group. And basically, the group was big enough to represent about 1% of that populational area. All right. And by daily practice of transcendental meditation with a focused goal of just non-violence, it affected the area around the town, and they proved that crime went down because of this practice. Okay, so what does that mean for the individual? If we spend our day focused on our awareness and developing our awareness, we will be a little bit more objective and calm in our everyday environment. Okay. Your wife will notice, your kids will notice that you aren't yelling at them, you're spending more time talking with them. Okay. That in itself is a miraculous accomplishment. We could stop there. But if your wife does that, then your interactions, not just in your home, your everyday interactions in your community or your work environment are going to also be effective because your mood, your vibrational self is effective. So back to that chart I talked about that's in the book about the chakras and about the neutrality of the heart. All right, your lower emotions like pride, anger, shame, or guilt are on a different frequency. They're on a lower frequency. A lot of what is happening in chaos and violence and stuff like that, I would term as lower frequency emotions. If you're becoming more aware and you're raising your vibration where you see it, you're happier, you're taking time to pursue yourself, and that has a cognitive effect on your environment as a general. And then all your friends are going to say, well, all right, what are you doing that I'm not doing? Because you're a lot happier than I am, and I'm still, well, I'm doing this. I became a little bit more aware of what makes me tick. I'm starting to work on, remember that hobby I had. I used to build bird houses. I'm building bird houses on a regular basis, and it just makes me happier. And okay, well, I don't like build bird houses. Well, what do this is all right. Well, then you're going to talk about what you did to get to that point, and then they're going to say, well, I could do that too, because it's not there. I'm not asking you to join some type of retreat or anything like that. And that's the really the pinpoint of this book and stuff like that. It's just to make you aware of the things that are around you. I took up pen and paper and I started journaling my goals, and I started journaling my emotions, and I do this and I spend maybe 20 minutes out of it, and that's what I do for today. That's it. So you change a little bit of your time. It's a shift. It's a shift in time management. It's a shift in personal time management. We all have the same amount of time. All right. There's a big, and if we each do that individually, and that's what that study says. It had a cognitive effect on the area. And all of a sudden, like if we just turn off the television for like a week, just turn off the television, you know, turn it off for a week. See how your mood changes. Okay. We do it on vacation, we unplug from our environment for like a week at a time or whatever. All right, well, if we could do that for a week, why can't we do that every day? All right. And if every day all of a sudden that we're doing this and our community is like you'll get more involved in your community because people are like, they want to know what you're doing because you're happy all the time. You're having an effect on the community. If more communities have that same effect, then it's going to spread. And then the chaos stays away. It's on the peripheral. And there's a lot of chaos. And a lot of it, you could just, you could shut off very easily. And then all of a sudden and that's part of the blueprint of this book, you know.
Excellent, Joe. Well, look, I think people are going to really gain a lot from our discussion today. I know I have. It just helps me kind of reset a lot of things in my life. So thank you for that. But before I let you go, I like to ask every guest this. At the end of the day, I know you're doing a lot of work out there, but what do you want your legacy to be? What are you trying to leave behind?
This book itself is part of my legacy. I am currently unmarried. I don't have any children. So all my activities are I'm putting out there are my legacy. And at the same time, I'm just trying to be a person that, is just affecting my environment and as positive as I possibly can. Every day, I'm just making sure I'm smiling and stuff like that. I'm making sure that it's going to be what's going to be. Uh, I have totes filled with journals and books and things and art and paintings and things like that. Eventually they'll get passed on somewhere and stuff like that. But my immediate goal is just being as positive and as each day. That's my legacy. It's every day. I want to be the best person I can be today. What's happening tomorrow is a mystery. What happened yesterday is gone. I just try to be the best person I can be today. And that's my legacy.
Fantastic. Joseph Moore, the title of the book, Cultivating Ascension. Welcome to the American Real family. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Through the website. There's actually our Instagram, the Mad Workshop, 90 Seconds of Wisdom is also on Instagram. I have a website, levitylifellc.com. And there's another website that just particularly on the books and stuff like that. And that is ithacanstardust.com.
Wonderful. We'll put the links in the show notes as well, so people could just click on them, get to your book, get to your website. Again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure spending time with you today.
It was a pleasure to spend time with you, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to American Real. For more stories like this one, be sure to stop by AmericanReal.tv. Follow us on all social media to stay up to date with everything American Real. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and contact one of our publishing experts if you're ready to publish your book and become a best-selling author.